Roadmen, welcome back to the podcast. Today's guest is Mr. Alex Wild. Today's podcast is a little bit unique. Alex Wild is one of the top racers in the Lifetime Grand Prix series. Sea Otter was the opening race in that series, which just took place. Alex has agreed to come on the podcast, open up his data, show us exactly what it takes to be at the front of these bike races. The preparation, in race, the data, the fueling strategies, the tactics, the dynamics, the gossip. It's all here. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Alex Wild. Alex, welcome back to the Roadman Pod.
Thanks for having me.
What did it feel like to finally be standing on the Sea Otter start line, knowing the Lifetime Grand Prix is officially underway for 2025?
Man, it felt quick this year. I feel like I was just taking my month off, and I've done a good job in the off season of what I call keeping it fun. There's stages of my off season. Like I trained through December, and then my wife and I went to do a camp dedicated, took some time off work to go to Maui and just ride and run. Nice. And then me and my buddies always do what we call a coast ride, which is 3 big days, normally 6 hours on Memorial Day weekend. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And yeah, come off the back of that, go into Cape Epic. And yeah, like you said, I just standing on the start line of Sea Otter, like, wow, the season's here. It's time to go.
We're going to dive in. We're going to talk data, tactics, tech, everything Sea Otter. But just to give some context as to the lead into Sea Otter, what did that block look like in between, as you said, riding Cape Epic and coming into Sea Otter? Is it a case of just freshening up, or what's going on there?
I think it's listening to your body. So taking a step back, before we went to Cape Epic, we did a Cape Replica block. So it was 2,000 TSS, I think, in 8 days. So big block. And then the nice thing about that is it makes travel less stressful for me because you take those days off because you need them anyway. So you're not worrying about like getting there, building them, like spinning. Like there's no rush to travel, which I enjoy. And then came into Cape Epic. Going into Cape Epic, my body was saying, hey, we need a little extra time. So we took a little more spin days as I got to South Africa and just trusted that the body would show up. And then the day before the TT, when we did some openers, it was kind of like, okay, now we're cooking with gas. We got the engine back underneath me. And Cape Epic went super well for me. Some people probably listen to the pod. Zach struggled a little bit with some health stuff. So we both going slower than we expected. So with that, we thought we might recover a little quicker, which we did. Honestly, within 2 days after Cape Epic, which was very surprising to me, I was doing spins. So for me, that's like 2 to 240 roughly, just easy cruising. And I was feeling like I needed to up those a little bit. So I put them into endurance, so closer to 250, just because I knew travel back again is 2 days off the bike. So I didn't really want to lose too much. We got back, got off the plane, swapped to the drop bar bike, which is always an interesting one for me. Sometimes it takes a few days to get used to, but honestly, right off the plane, felt great. The next day we did 7 by 8 minutes with 3 minutes rest and was hitting phenomenal numbers. So we knew we were ready.
What's a phenomenal number?
I mean, I did the 7 by 8 minutes at 4 to 4:30 with only 3 minutes rest between. So I think the normalized was like 390 for over an hour.
Oh, that's a brutal session.
Yeah, and it's a good sign, right? Because in that, the 3 minutes is strategic because it's teaching your body to flush that lactate and flush it quickly. So I think that repeatability was there, which was exciting. And then kind of when you see something like that as an athlete, you're like, oh, sick, I want to do intervals again tomorrow. And as a coach, you're like, oh, sick, he's ready for a race. Let's not do intervals again tomorrow. So it was nice that I had that knowledge. And so we knew we were ready for Sea Otter at that point. It was kind of just maintaining. So we got a little bit of a block in, got out to the course one more time to see it, and then the usual week lead up. We did do some sauna work just because South Africa was hot, so we know we had heat acclimatization already. So we did a few 25 to 30 minute sessions in the sauna just to make sure we kept that topped up. And then, yeah, I mean, coming into Sea Otter, it was the opposite of Cape Epic. I was worried about being too fresh, so I just wanted to do a little bit of work. We did the group ride the Saturday before and just punched it a little bit just to kind of keep the engine running, but also, again, not let your legs go from fresh to blocked, essentially. So
The week before is interesting. I was chatting to Dan Lorang last week. He's the head of performance for Bora. And he's saying a lot of the riders there now have moved away from a taper before a big event. So they're tapering them 2 weeks out from an event and then going back into build 1 week before an event because they like to come in with a bit of fatigue. They just feel too undercooked with a traditional taper.
yeah, I think that a bit of it comes with experience, right? And I think listening to your body is key there because at Cape Epic, right, the taper was what made me good for the race. And then coming into Sea Otter, knowing that I needed a little bit more to make sure I wasn't blocked to kind of have the engine going. So I think you learn how that feels and you can kind of, like I was coming to each race from a different perspective. Like Cape Epic,
Yeah.
I was trying to get good, and Sea Otter, I was flying and trying to make it so I didn't like detrain almost.
Any interesting bike setup decisions? What did you go with on the day?
I was going to run Explore, but it's an interesting course. It's a really, really fast course with a really steep climb at the end, like a proper 8 to 12 minute climb, depending on if you include the corkscrew and everything. So I knew I wanted to run the biggest chainring possible, but I went to transmission so that I could run a 50-tooth up front, but still have a 50-52 as my bailout gear instead of a 50-46.
So how does that work for someone that's not familiar with it?
So essentially, you divide the front chainring by the rear to get what's called your gear ratio. So if I had run transmission with a 50-52, that's underneath 1. So to put it in perspective, to get that same ratio or close to it on Explore, I would have had to run a 44-tooth front chainring. Also, in terms of efficiency, a rough, I guess, best practice is the bigger the chainring, the less the chain bends, the more efficient it is. So I knew I would be in that biggest gear going up parts of Lookout no matter what, because it's just steep. So essentially what I did is the cassette on the transmission is 10-52, where on the Explorer it's 10-46. So I still have the same fastest gear with a 10 for the flats, the downhill, anywhere that's really pedally, which Sea Otter is notoriously a big power course. There's very little time you're spent coasting. So it's kind of trying to get both ends of that spectrum, which is rare because we're doing a pretty long, steep climb. And I just felt that those first 2 laps could be sub-maximal as the group kind of susses itself out. So I wanted to be able to have a higher cadence while still riding that lower power. And it worked out. My average cadence, I think, ended up being 91 for the day. So
how about Tyre setup?
I did the 2.2 Air Track, which is the replacement for the Renegade in the front, and then a 50 Tracer, which is our new gravel tire in the rear. Hindsight,
inserts?
Nope. I don't really do inserts ever. I don't like the way they make the tires feel. I may run them at Unbound just because you don't really need tire feel there. There are a lot of flat left and right hand corners that just don't require much skill, I guess, for lack of another word. Just so extra safety there. But don't normally run inserts.
And will you stick with, sorry to jump ahead to Unbound, we will get into it. I know we're going to do a separate pod on that. But is the initial thinking you're going to run mountain bike tires for Unbound, or will you stick with gravel?
I will likely run the 2.2 Air Tracks front and rear.
Interesting. Seems to be the way it's going.
Yeah.
Everyone's geeking out on that at the moment. Was there anything else in terms of tech that you felt gave you an edge on your competition that you got right?
Maybe not an edge, but I guess I got a little with the times this year. I've gone to 40 bars. I've gone to 165 cranks. I've also done Aero socks, and I had an Aero base layer on. And I'm running the Evade almost exclusively now. So I guess more unseen gains in terms of just trying to optimize where I can. Yeah.
The Aero base layer is interesting. I've had some friends that have had it in the tunnel. Are you talking like the mini one looks like a bra with the Rule 28 and some other brands seem to make them?
I have one that Specialized has made. It is not commercially available, but we're working with Bora Hansgrohe this year.
Okay.
So since I work at Specialized, I know the apparel guy, and he was able to get me one pair of socks and one Aero base layer. So if it's good enough for the world tour, it's good enough for me.
I haven't seen the data on them, but I know the problem with the bra ones is, if anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about, like a half base layer, they're like something you'd wear to like an S&M night out where your nipples are still exposed.
Yeah.
But the data I've seen on the wind tunnel from those is they're more aerodynamic than not having them when they're super well positioned underneath your speed suit. But if the positioning of the seams is misaligned under your speed suit, they're actually slower than not wearing it at all, which is...
And that's similar data to Aero shoe covers, Aero socks. Pretty much as soon as you see creases, you're losing some of the gains. But my apparel sponsor, DNA, makes a really nice skin suit. And actually the fabric on the arms is one that is really good to have that dual layer fabric. So sometimes if the fabric on top too is too thick, the ribbing that makes it fast won't actually show through or affect your slipperiness. So yeah, I mean, Aero is a bit hard to test until, the sensors that you can put on your bikes yourselves come out. And I firmly believe in the future on climbs we'll be talking watts per kilo, and then on the flats we'll be talking watts per CDA, and you'll be able to see both on your head unit live. I think we're just a few years from that.
Hey everybody, let's take a quick break to talk about the bike I'll be riding this season, Reap. I've been lucky enough to ride all the top brands in the world over the past few years, but these Reap bikes, they're not the same, and I'll tell you why. Reap is the first company I've seen that isn't chasing sales targets and the mass market. They're chasing something very rare, perfection. Every bike they make, it's crafted in the UK factory, and it's not about slapping a Made in Britain label on a bike from a Chinese factory. It's about control. From the first sketch to the final build, they're hands-on, ensuring that every detail is dialed in. That's very rare in an outsourced world of mass production. What sets them apart is innovation. While others pump out the same old designs, Reap's pushing boundaries. They're not following trends, they're setting trends. Think precision and performance, like an F1 car for the road. Absolutely no compromises. And it shows, and you can feel it when you ride the bikes. These bikes are built for riders who demand the best, whether they're chasing podiums or just want a machine that feels like an extension of your body, a piece of art. It's not hype, it's substance. Ride a Reap for yourself and you're riding something crafted with intent. So if you're serious about cycling, check them out. It's reapbikes.com. I absolutely love my one and I couldn't recommend it highly enough. Back to the show. I have one of them here. I'm not sure if you played around. I'm using Gimbly and it's the real-time coefficient of frontal drag sensor, but yeah, it's not quite there where you were saying. I know there's Body Rocket and a few other brands as well are doing similar stuff, but there's a lot of stuff affects that, and to try and put on a pair of Aero socks versus regular socks and to get that data, it's just not really there. I think that's going to be a few years away. First 20-30 minutes of the race, what's that like? Is it total carnage, or do people kind of know their pecking order and there's a little bit of respect for that hierarchy based on last year?
I think people are forced to recognize their pecking order with how fast that start was.
It's a Darwinian pecking order.
Yeah, I think we came out swinging pretty fast. Sea Otter, regardless of being the Fuego XL or this new gravel race, we start up the track. It's kind of the same formula. I didn't have a call up this year because they decided to do top 5 overall from the Grand Prix last year and then top 5 at Sea Otter last year, both of which I narrowly missed. So I knew it was going to be the same thing as always, that the sooner you line up, the better. So I actually started my warm-up, I think 25 minutes early, just so I knew I'd get my full warm-up in. And I also told my mechanic, Daniel, to essentially have rollers set up at the finish just in case I wanted to hop on them and I could kind of wait in line while rolling. So as soon as I saw people lining up, I was at the tape and I was essentially right behind everyone that got the call up, so second row. And that's super
still like
important.
A drag race, like into that first single track, like where Pete Stettner broke his hand a couple of years ago?
It's not that same single track section, and this time it is onto a fire road, but I was a little worried because that fire road is technical in terms of riding it full gas with 100 people next to you. There's ruts, there's a little bit of sand, there's a lot of dust you can't see. So although it's not technical to ride per se, I think the race made it technical. So being up front is still super important. I wasn't too bothered about leading the race at that point or being top 3. I thought, top 10 to 20 would be fine. Essentially, I felt we still do that chicane. So a quick right, quick left. And then there's a little climb and then we start descending. I felt if I was top 10, 15 wheels, that I'm kind of out of that possibility of carnage where someone's dive bombing you because they're not where they want to be. Someone's super tired because they're, riding above their fitness level, crossing wheels, crashing, unclipping, whatever it is. I just didn't want to waste those matches. So it's kind of that fine balance of at the front enough. And I checked that box.
When did the first pivotal moments come?
I think that was the first pivotal moment, honestly. It doesn't feel like it when you've succeeded, but there are riders that started too far back and still made the front group, but they had a few less matches in their match book. So that was the first fight. And then that fire road brings us to the bottom of the second longest climb on course. And Matt hit it pretty hard there. So I imagine someone probably just got on and then has to do 450, 500 watts for 3 minutes to get up this climb. And that's got to hurt. And
Matt puts out, we're talking Matt Beers here, Matt puts out wild power. Like, he's a big dude, but his power numbers are wild.
Well, in his wheel, it feels like he's a big dude. You feel like you should get a better draft than you do because he puts out so much power. You just feel like you don't actually get a draft because you're still putting out just as much power in his wheel. So, massive.
Is there
talent.
any psychological advantage to going, I'm sitting at 440 in his wheel here. Like, he's got to be doing easy 540 up there. Like, that has to be hurt.
Yeah, I don't have power up when I race, but I mean, I know I'm at that level that if I'm hurting, everyone's hurting. So I think there is solace in that in terms of if I'm hurting behind him, he's hurting himself to do the effort, and anyone who's still with us is hurting, which every time that happens, you kind of are a little happy because you're first 5 wheels. So imagine someone who's 25th wheel seeing gaps open up. Not only is it mentally taxing, but if they're going to go faster than Matt is at the front to get to the front, then that's either a really impressive rider or they're writing their own ticket.
Well, that's also where you're talking about that first win of the day's position in the top 15, because for anyone that hasn't been in that position, if you find yourself 40 wheels back, initially you're doing the same draft maybe as someone in wheel 10, but then somebody in wheel 35 decides, oh, this is too much for me, and they pull out. So wheel 36 now has a bike length to close, and this happens all the way up the line. So you end up having all these extra gaps to close on top of the power, which Matt is putting out on the front.
Exactly.
What's the data look like in that first 30 minutes, having looked back at it in hindsight?
I haven't looked at it, but I can pull it up here real fast. Give the people the numbers.
Everyone loves numbers. We're just, because it's like clipping into a lie detector, and it also shines a light on our own inadequacies and go, my dream of actually maybe I could win Sea Otter is just, it's just fiction.
Well, I think the consensus after the race that it was an incredibly hard race, but the Grand Prix is kind of frustrating because everyone feels like they've taken this massive step up every year. And that massive step up, everyone seems to have taken. And so you get to the race and I think Dylan Johnson, and I appreciate him being super transparent about it, said, I think he did 317 normalized for the race. Best PR for him ever for 38th. And just mind-blowing to him and to everyone that we're putting out power PRs and some riders are going backwards in placings.
I talked to Dylan last week and he was super happy with how his winter had gone, how his preparation had gone. His numbers had never been looking better. And then yet to see that post was a bit like, oh, everyone else is training. I actually thought Keegan was going to go backwards. I said that on the podcast with Dylan. I was like, he's looked pretty secondhand in Cape Epic. You know, he's saying he had a back injury. He looked pretty secondhand in some of the other gravel races early season down in Texas. And I was like, this could be the year that Keegan doesn't lead the Grand Prix. And I looked at the results and I was like, oh man.
I think those results without context are a little misleading. In Texas, there was a breakout front, and then the weather caused it to be called unexpectedly, and the winner didn't even know he won. So the race was supposed to run for another 3 hours. So Keegan was probably like, I'm happy with that break up the road. I'll catch him by the end. And then it didn't work out that way due to weather. And then Cape, yeah, I mean, it could go either way, right? But I think with him, it wasn't a fitness thing. It was a back thing. So as long as he can sort that out and figure out what caused it, maybe he tried a different fit on his mountain bike, whatever it could be. Maybe he went with the 40-tooth chaining. Maybe that caused the cadence to be too low and he was just grinding too much. You know, I haven't talked to him about it, so it's all speculation. But I think for him, it could be anything in terms of what caused that. But
I mean, my hot prediction was that he was the dude that never happened to, though, for the last few years. You know, where you could say he got super lucky, or he never flatted, he got super lucky. He never got injured, he got super lucky. Another way you could look at that is he was super well prepared, so he never flatted or got injured.
Super well prepared. What I know about Keegan is that he does his homework. And yeah, there is a piece where, you know, there is luck involved with flats, but he also chooses setups that he knows he can run and be successful with. So yeah, I think no surprise, but maybe the field was also hoping that there was a chink in the armor, for sure.
When you say the field, you mean you personally?
No, for sure. And the way he was riding wasn't usual Keegan dominance. Like he would go to the front at lookout and set the pace, and he would do his turns. But Keegan likes to ride from the front, and he likes to soften the field. And Matt was kind of filling that void on Thursday.
Interesting. Did you find your numbers?
Yeah. So first 20 minutes was 352 raw, 411 normalized.
Ooh, spicy.
Yeah. So
what's the total race file average normalized?
343 normalized for 4 hours and 22 minutes.
Wow, that's a big day on the ticket.
Oh, it was a day. Let me tell you.
And you're like high 60 kilogram.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not achievable for most mortals. What's this? You probably don't have access to it offhand, but what's this year's power profile feel like? You said everyone's moved on. How much do you think you've personally moved on from Sea Otter 2024 to Sea Otter 2025?
So I guess just raw data. The FTP I was training to last year was 380. The FTP I'm training to this year is 400.
Okay, big.
And it's possibly too low. But I also, even when it was 380, my brain, I guess, or the way I work is I really struggle to hit the bottom of ranges. I like to hit the middle top of ranges. So we actually artificially lower the FTP. Like we chatted about with doing 440 twice for 20. Theoretically, that would put me at 420 or roughly around there. But I think we decided 400 just because there's no point in just wringing myself out in training. So, I mean, real FTP, who knows? I think FTP is kind of just a dick swinging thing at this point and saying you do this much or you do that much. But I think I like to think of it of different mastery levels. Like essentially how far into a race can you do that? How many times can you repeat that? I think those are the more important things. And so, but yeah, roughly, what is that? 5 to 8% increase year over year.
Yeah, that's huge. And I know that doesn't even capture something that we talked about last time that you've worked on a lot, that durability, the ability to put it out later in the race.
Well, the crazy thing is I did the Fuego XL 2 days later, and that power file was more.
Winner, chicken dinner.
I did 356 normalized for 405. So I don't know if it's just my mountain bike background and we still need to tweak the fit on the Crux to kind of have that same power delivery, or what we just talked about, you know, maybe I do need to come into a race a little more revved or what it was. But I mean, this one for me is like, did I remember to calibrate my power meter? Like even for me, seeing 356 for 4 hours, 2 days after probably the hardest gravel race in my life is just kind of unconceivable.
We have 3 long-form podcasts every week. Some of them are 90 minutes or 2 hours long, and I realize you're busy. Sometimes it's hard to cut through the noise and figure out the signal, figure out what the important parts are of these conversations. So I've taken your feedback, and once a week I'm delivering to your inbox a newsletter called The Saturday Spin. It's a 4-minute read or less, and it's going to break down the very best thing I've learned on the podcast this week. So it's insights from the biggest names in the world tour, physiologists, sports psychologists, and coaches. It's completely free to sign up to the newsletter. All you have to do is go to roadmancycling.com, stick in your email address, and once a week on a Saturday morning, I will deliver the Saturday Spin newsletter direct to your inbox. The link is down below. Go sign up. And what did you do in between? Because that was Sunday. Sea Otter was Friday. What did you do on Saturday?
It was Thursday, Saturday, and Friday. I just did an 1.5-hour spin on the mountain bike just to make sure I was familiar with it.
Okay. And yeah, it's pretty well. It speaks to that durability you've talked about, that so many podcasts and physiologists have gone ad nauseum about the limitations on assessing someone's ability just off FTP or just off a critical power number, because it doesn't show you what Van der Poel done in the final of Roubaix.
Well, I think there is even a snippet from his team manager that says his fresh numbers aren't actually that impressive compared to those of his teammates, but he does a very, very high percentage of them 6 hours into a race.
Yeah, no, it's totally different. I remember training with friends who were World Tour, and that was the huge difference for me. Was I didn't have that word to put on it then. I was just like, oh, they're built different. But it'd be the 5-minute climb up to the cafe at the end of the spin when they're still putting out 550 or something. I'm like, what? Like, I can get close to these numbers fresh on a good day, but I can't go close to these after 5-6 hour spins.
Absolutely.
What does the weekend, what does it tell you about your preparation? Does it fill you with confidence, or is there still work to be done?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, honestly, my result could have been better. I made a few mistakes in the last lap. I had a caffeine gel ready for me going into the last lap, and I missed it. And then at the next feed zone, I missed my bottle. So I still had fuel on board because I had carbs, fuel in my pockets, but I wasn't drinking for a solid 30, 40 minutes. And then to kind of kick that off is as we were coming into the last feed zone, which I'm now forced to take a bottle from because I need it, that's when everything was kicking off. And I kind of just made that mistake of I grabbed the bottle and kind of sorted out the gels and put it in my bike. I should have just grabbed the bottle, thrown it on my bike, and worried about using it to hydrate later because there's a climb right after. And just that 1 to 2 seconds I let Keegan's wheel go was just the elastic snapping for me. And me and Peter Vakoch were chasing all the way to the bottom of Lookout, the lead 4. And then by the time I got there, I kind of had just punched my own ticket with that effort. So I think some learnings, but I mean, I'm there, right? 6th place overall, 5th place in the Grand Prix in arguably one of the hardest races we've seen at the Grand Prix level is super confidence inspiring. My XL time, essentially solo, was 4 minutes faster than I did in the Grand Prix last year.
Unreal.
So,
but does your XL time also give you hope into what's set up this year as a more mountain bikey focused series? Does it give you hope they're coming back to your terrain?
I still don't believe it's mountain bike focused. The only mountain bike race in there is Little Sugar. If we're honest with ourselves,
who you talk to.
is a grass crit, and then Leadville is becoming a gravel race. So
it's funny when you talk to the roadies, they're like, "Oh, it's a full mountain bike series now. I'm not even doing it." You talk to the mountain bike guys, they're like, "Ah, it's still a road series."
Yeah, I think we've always naturally had the advantage because it's all off road. So even little things like at Unbound, right? If we take half a second out of someone who doesn't know how to handle their bike out of every corner over 10 hours, yeah, they can bridge up or whatever. a few times, 100 times, but there's a lot of corners and there's a lot of times when just efficiency of rolling through that means that we're putting 5 to 10 watts less over the whole day. So I don't think we're articulating it right. I don't think it's a mountain bike series. I think it's an off-road series. And roadies come from road and mountain bikers come from dirt. And I think the crossover to a mountain bike is much more significant because we're used to our tires moving underneath us. We're used to that efficiency, slow in, fast out, looking for essentially that right line. So
I also think as roadies, and I'm heaping myself into that category, we've had to learn this totally new world, this new world of pressure, tires, tire widths. These weren't conversations that we ever had on the road. I can never remember being at a road race where this mattered until it started mattering in the hybrid gravel space. And now it matters in road, now it matters everywhere. But you guys have been having these conversations for a decade.
Absolutely. The way I think about it is we learn from the roadies from the waist up or from anything not touching
from
the
Aero
ground.
socks up.
Yeah, exactly. So I would never have run 40 centimeter bars. I would have never looked at 165 cranks. I would have never worn Aero socks or an Aero base layer. That I learned from, Dylan Johnson. His YouTube, I think, is a blessing and a curse for him. But and then from everything touching the ground, I think that's what we're learning. We took cues from the wrong sport, and that's why everything's going to mountain bike tires. And I still run mountain bike pedals almost exclusively, but maybe I should start running road pedals at some races. But essentially, that contact patch with the ground, I think it's only leaning more towards us now that, like you said, at Unbound, we're essentially going to be using mountain bike tires, something we've been using for years, and we know how that feels and how it connects with the ground. So we actually don't have to learn anything new. We already have the pressures dialed. So
you think we're going to see, I know this is maybe gone to your day job as well, you think we're going to see these dynamic pressure adjustments moving across into gravel?
I was thinking about that when I saw them pop up again at Paris-Roubaix. It could have been interesting at Sea Otter because there were some road sections. I don't know if there's enough. I don't know if I can think of off the top of my head a race where there's enough of a split between like chunky gravel and smooth road that it would be a benefit. Because you think of something like Belgian Waffle Ride, there's not enough dirt, so you just run like 32 durable road tires. And then something like Unbound, there's barely any road minus the finish. Are you going to carry that whole system just to bet on a sprint?
Yeah.
So I think, I can't think of a use case in terms of like a 50-50 course, but it could be interesting.
I know you're cooking up a little something with cyclesport.com. We're going to do a full Roadman, Alex Wild podcast, Lifetime Grand Prix series. So the plan is before Unbound, if you're up for it, we'll do a pre-Unbound podcast where we'll talk through everyone wants to geek out on tires, equipment, because it's the Tour de France of gravel. And then we'll do a post-Unbound. And likewise, then we'll continue this series across the rest of the Lifetime Grand Prix. And hopefully we'll get you. It's not the first time I've done one of these series. Myself and Jay Vine had one where we checked in when Jay was a Neo Pro. And we're like, we wonder, can you get legitimately a World Tour contract the following year? Then he moved from Alpe into UAE. Then he started winning Vuelta stages. So it's like, we're hoping for a similar trajectory here. No pressure, though.
There we go. You and me both. Yeah, I think whatever the appetite for it is, I enjoy the podcasting and chatting and getting to know new people and new audiences. So I encourage everyone listening to either go over to the Roadman Instagram or my own, Alex Wild MTB. Send us questions, comment down below with what you want to hear, what you want to see. The goal is just to kind of give everyone a behind the scenes. And I think it'd be cool. We're going to do a custom bottle. So if you go to cyclesport.com, which is my title sponsor, essentially you can get anything bike related there. You need tubes, tires, wheels, frames, bikes, anything you could want. And if you put Roadman in the comments, we'll make sure your order ships with one of these bottles.
Awesome. I better get one.
We'll get you two. How about that?
What are we
mismatched bottles?
What are we looking like now into a little bit of downtime between now and Unbound? This is another one of the features that makes this series so unique, because any of the roadies I interview, it's like, okay, you finished Roubaix at the weekend. What have we got? Okay, we've got what's Brand Chapal is on Friday this week.
Yeah.
And it's like, it just comes so fast. That's not the reality with the series. It's back to work for you, but training wise, what's this run into Unbound look like now?
Yeah, so I'll do Levi's this weekend, which seems like the biggest 1-day road race right now. I train a bit with Levi when I go up to Tahoe, so it's his event, about 2.5 hours from my house. So, and a crazy prize purse. I think it's $25,000 for the win. So,
Oh, seriously?
yeah, that'll be live streamed, I believe, on YouTube, but I'll post on my stories when I have that link. So anyone can watch if they're interested. And then likely like an easy, what I call an optional week, where we'll probably put a spin every day. But if I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to ride today, kind of just skip it and see how the body feels. Essentially, the goal is to freshen up both physically and mentally. And then from that point, I believe we have 4 weeks to Unbound. So we'll likely do 2 to 3 weeks of big volume and push up that durability and that endurance a little more. And then probably a 7 to 10 day taper into the actual event itself.
Amazing. We'll be in touch before then. Alex, thanks for a quite unique insight into the opener for the Lifetime Grand Prix. And congratulations on the win. Congratulations on 5th in the series. Onwards and upwards from here, hopefully.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching, Roadman. Take 1 second, click up here to subscribe to the channel, and click down here where there's another video I know you'll love. See you next day.